Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about something that is really important to me and has really changed my life, and that is Jenkum.
There's a new way for your kids to get high. They're using raw sewage.
I couldn't imagine doing something like that. Sounds pretty sick to me.
Honestly, they need to find something better to do with their life. Seriously.
Something new, something stimulating, something different.
There's a lot of people that say it's a hoax or it's not real or it's just made up or whatever. Now let's just get this out of the way first, so you can laugh it all off or whatever, You won't be laughing once you experience what I have and have your life change. But, it's human waste. It's, shit.
Was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so I've had this issue when I've started doing some of these like conservative comedy shows where there are still a lot of like old school Republicans at these events, right? Like Reaganite Republicans. Right. And if they have like this mentality of like, if you do anything risque, it's like very taboo. And it's like, I kind of, at that show that I did, the one I told you about, the Make America Laugh Again show, I like got in the audience because I have this new bit that I started doing where I talk about a diagnosis I got from a gay optometrist. So I went to get my eyes checked, and the optometrist was as gay as they come. And right. And he was like, looked in my eyes forever, shined a light in there, and he's like, I think you might have a brain tumor. He's like, you have papillodemus, you have swollen optic nerve, which I've had for over a decade. Right. I have high blood pressure, so I have swollen optic arteries, and the swollen optic nerve thing, I later found out, is a pretty common side effect, long-term side effect of people who've had COVID, and I've had it multiple times. Yeah. So that's sort of neither here nor there. But the whole kind of concept for me was funny because I'm like, well, you think a man's asshole is where your penis goes, so automatically I'm throwing out all of your medical advice, right? Like I have to immediately get a second opinion. So I create this new bit around this idea where I'm just like, yeah, you have a medical opinion that you want to put your penis where the shit comes out, and that makes you not a good doctor. So I open with this bit, right? And the audience gets super weird and super uncomfortable because I'm just talking about dudes that fuck each other. Right. And meanwhile, there's two obviously gay dudes in the front, shirts opened, 4 shades tanner than everybody else in the room, gold chains, like full manicure. You can tell these are two gay guys. And they are dying. They are dying. They're having such a good time. Right. And then, of course, everybody's like pearl clutching through this whole bit. And at one point, I just go, listen, man, the conservative party is changing. Like, conservatism is now about individualism and liberty and individual freedom and personal responsibility. So you can take that pearl clutching shit and get the fuck out. And yeah, it was just, so there is this sort of like, it's almost like a weird civil war on the right, where it's like there's the new conservatism, which is really individualism, and then classic conservatism, which is very sort of like puritanical in nature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a struggle going on with that. I mean, I remember something that happened a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember, but there was some porn star who was trying to go to like Turning Point USA's conference or something. Okay. And they, I think her name was Brandy something. All right. But anyway, she just signed up, bought a ticket, and she's a porn star, but she's also written like conservative essays for the Federalist, so, I mean, she's a conservative. She just happens to like have sex on camera for a living.
Yeah, and by the way, since the advent of OnlyFans, that's only, 48% of all women in the United States now. So what are we talking about?
Right, right. But they like threw her out, and she just bought a ticket. I mean, she wasn't like going to speak there or sell her DVDs or whatever there.
Right.
It's like, what are we doing? I mean, it's like as long as she votes the right way, I really don't care, right? What she does. I mean, and it's like, how did they even know that she was a porn star? I mean, they must be watching it.
That's a good question. Yeah. Hey, you're not supposed to be on our team.
Right. And it's like, but we need everybody on our team we can get, because you're right. It's about individual liberty and freedom, or it should be. And the intersection of the kind of religious part of the conservative movement and the non-religious, kind of secular individual liberty part, we need to kind of come to some sort of peace with each other.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest complaints about, the right. And that's one of the biggest problems they have going into these upcoming elections is it's very fractured party. And while I would not disagree that the left is also fractured, they all are kind of aligned that if everything is going super left, then they'll just follow that, right? Yeah. And there's so much infighting on the right. I mean, look at the California election, and I don't know about you, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because this is a big thing that's coming up. And to be honest, this election is going to determine whether or not I stay in Los Angeles or not.
No kidding. So, I said that to somebody this morning. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah. I said if they vote to keep Gavin Newsom, the state is lost. You better get the hell out while you can.
It's lost. We drove through, we went to Melrose the other day just to walk the shops and grab some food or whatever. And, just to get out of the house and do something. And I was like, you turn the corner anywhere in Hollywood, it's unbelievable. It looks like that movie District 9. I mean, I was waiting for a 7-foot-tall shrimp-like alien to walk out of the fucking tents because it's gotten that bad.
Yeah. No, and it's everywhere, and it's creeping into every part of LA. I mean, I live in Burbank, and Burbank
that's where we live too. We're neighbors, Nick.
Right,
we live like blocks from each other.
We could just go down the street and meet instead of doing this by
I know, it's ridiculous. This is what it is now, man. This is, we got to film ourselves. We're basically doing the OnlyFans version for two guys having a conversation. It's like, but it's like we can't really eat lunch anywhere. Well, right, but and that's another thing we'll talk about is the restaurants in town, because that's how you and I started chatting with each other. But it's you go through the city, and I know for a while on like locals and live streams and stuff, you were doing walks through LA and showing people just like how tumultuous it's become. Yeah,
and even Burbank, which is separate police department, separate city. You almost never used to see a homeless person in Burbank, and now you see them all the time. And if you get out of Burbank, if you go over into North Hollywood and drive under any bridge, it's just like there's colonies established under these bridges. And I was talking to a realtor friend of mine, and she said that part of the reason Burbank property prices are still kind of high is because people are getting the hell out of Malibu and Santa Monica, because those places are ruined and they don't want to completely leave LA, so they're looking at Burbank.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I live on a street that's all apartment buildings, and then we're mostly in a residential neighborhood. And when you go a block over, it's all homes. It's all single family homes. And those homes a block over from us, across from Disney, so we're off of Alameda, and you go a block over, those homes when we moved here almost 10 years ago now were like $500,000 homes, 500,000, 600,000. They're like small 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom ranch style homes.
Right.
Those houses now are all 900 to 1.5. And I'm talking like 1.5, and it needs a lot of work. Like it needs a new roof. You know what I mean? It needs a new roof. It needs new siding. Like fucked up 1.5. And that's just like because it's not a tent.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you want not a tent, it's $1 million.
Yeah, and you can't expect to spend $1 million and get something you can actually just move into. You're going to have to fix it.
Yeah, of course. Like, you better be, for $1 million, you better be a carpenter or have some real, savvy woodworking friends.
Yeah, it's $1 million teardown.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's crazy. And so that's the thing is like, I have had for the last 6 months, I've had recurring anxiety dreams. I wouldn't call them nightmares, but anxiety dreams of moving, of like, I'm in the middle of moving And, you know, and then it's like I just wake up with this panic of like, fuck, I like, that would be horrible to have to do that. It would be a nightmare. But furthermore, like working in entertainment out here, you're starting to kind of see that there's a real like tectonic plate shift happening in entertainment, the way it works, the way, you know, where things are being shot and filmed and you know, it's getting to the point where you're kind of looking around LA, at least myself as a stand-up, and going like, what is the fucking point of being here anymore? Like, I'm not working, like I'm not trying to be seen. I'm not trying to be in front of people because those industry types are not going to be interested in what I do or the fact that I don't keep my mouth shut about my opinions.
Right.
You know, the clubs themselves are dwindling. I mean, you know, I don't know if you saw, but the Comedy Store just recently mandated vaccines. So the interesting thing about that is that, oh, surprise, surprise, most of the comics on their lineups are not the better comics that they have passed, you know, in their clubs. So, you know, and I'm not saying all. There are still some people that are vaccinated that are good comedians, but for the most part, comedians as natural contrarians are not big on forced vaccination, believe it or not.
Right, and they're sort of killing all of the entertainment industries out here. It's like you can't do a play. The theaters are all closed. You can't go to an open mic night anymore. You know?
Yeah, I mean the idea that you have to be fully masked up and show proof of vaccination to sit in a comedy club and laugh at a comedian is just unreal to me. And the fucking pomp and circumstance of these vaccine or mask requirements, it's like, okay, so you don't have to wear it if you're eating or drinking in the restaurant, and you don't have to wear it outside. So you're telling me that I need to literally put it on to walk through the door, place an order, and go sit down. And that's the difference. And I can sit in that restaurant unmasked as long as there's a plate in front of me for fucking 5 hours. So you're telling me that the 4 minutes of me standing at the counter is somehow protecting someone when I sit at the table for 5 hours. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like the virus hovers about 4 feet off the ground, and like if you stand up out of the table, you're going to get it, and if you stay down, you're not. And the other thing I used to when they had that rule about 10 p.m. curfew, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. You know, it's like, what the hell? The virus gets drunk after 10 p.m. and just starts going, I'm going to infect somebody. I don't care who it is. I'm going to.
Right. You know, and it's getting to the point now as a comedian where like you're not even really making your base income off of live shows. Like the live shows for me are just like gravy on top. They're just extra money that I'm making. But like base income comes from album streams, online stuff, my locals community and subscribers. And then, you know, what I get paid to do my show on censored.tv. So like that, it's like all of that stuff I can pretty much do anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and then the other question is, okay, so if I want to be in a place where I could do a live show a month and make a good extra chunk of change, are my odds of filling a room better here or in Nashville or in South Carolina or, you know, Texas? So a place where people are actually like into the kind of shit I do and ideologically aligned with the kind of comedians I would want to showcase. So, you know, it's like you really do start to have to unpack, like, and there is this stubborn part of me that's like, I'm not going to cede, you know, to these fucking lunatics. Like, they're not going to run me off.
Right.
But in another thing, it's like, do you really want to be the guy who's stubborn and sinks with the ship and doesn't get on the fucking life raft?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine who moved away, and it's like, you know, a lot of us, me included, you know, I came here from North Carolina 30 years ago because I wanted to be an actor or whatever, and we had this romantic idea about Los Angeles was the place to do that. You know, that was the place where you could succeed and you could realize your dreams in entertainment. And there's just sort of an emotional thing about leaving here. It feels like you're kind of giving up on your dream, even though the fact of the matter is your dreams aren't here anymore. Yeah. All that shit that you moved here for, you know, to do in Los Angeles, you can't do it here anymore. So there's really, it's like I got to get over this whole emotional thing about, I came here to be an actor, and leaving here doesn't mean I'm not going to be an actor. It just means that the business isn't here anymore.
Yeah, and that's the other real thing too, is like, you look at these even like major productions. I mean, what films in Los Angeles anymore? Hardly anything. I mean, everything Disney and Marvel is doing is in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Almost every major series is either Atlanta or New Orleans. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff happening in Detroit now, and then there's a lot of most of the productions in terms of like it's like sitcoms and stuff. A lot of that's being done in Canada. Yeah. So when you start to look at it, it's like there's maybe a handful of like Showtime or HBO Max shows that are shot locally in LA, and that's it. And so when you start to look at that stuff, it's like, even to the point you made about like wanting to come to LA and be an actor, this isn't really the place you kind of have to be to do that anymore. And it's like, we've also sort of end-arounded, the industry side itself. Like, so many people get booked right off of their fucking social media for things now. That right. The need for agents and managers, I mean, as long as you have an entertainment lawyer or somebody who can work on your contracts, everything else is something you can pretty much do yourself.
Yeah, they've totally changed the business. Or I'd say the internet has changed the business. Everybody's accessible now. You don't have to have gatekeepers anymore. And what they don't realize is that they're cutting their own throats. The whole support system for the industry is no longer necessary, and you can actually, the technology has advanced to the point where you can make a movie on your iPhone that looks about as good as anything Hollywood can do if you just light it the right way. Yeah. And so it's all about content now, and if you're talented, you can create your content anywhere. You don't have to be here, and everything that I've been even offered or considered doing in the last 3 years has not been shooting in Los Angeles.
Well, you've really run the gamut in your career. I mean, when was your first, like, kind of walk me through timeline, like what is the thing that you considered to be your first big break or your first big pop in the entertainment industry? Because if anyone looks at your IMDb, there's tons of stuff on there. I mean, you've been at it for a long time, and it's amazing. Like, I'll be watching something. I think I texted you one night. We were watching Superbad, and I go, "That's you driving the bus," and you literally just see your face in the rearview mirror, and I go, "That's fucking Nick." And you're of course in one of my maybe one of my top 5 all-time favorite movies now, Moneyball, which is an incredible film. Yeah, absolutely amazing film. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, back to my question: which was the first thing for you that felt like, okay, I broke through. Now I'm legitimately in this business, for good.
Well, Fried Green Tomatoes was the movie that really. I had been in New York City for about 7 years when I got out of school, and I went there and I did a lot of plays, but I couldn't get much in terms of the movie business. And in 1989, my wife and we got pregnant. We moved back down to North Carolina. And I started doing little parts, and I had the movies were all shooting in the Carolinas even then in the late 80s. So my first, pretty decent role that I got was highway patrolman in Days of Thunder with
love
Tom
that
Cruise.
movie.
And I'm the guy who knocks on the door, and then the trooper with me is Leilani Sorrell, and she opens her shirt, and it's a big trick on Tom Cruise, and that was sort of my first real movie role. And then that kind of led to Fried Green Tomatoes. I was still living in the South, and same casting director did both movies. And I went in to read for a small part, and the director decided to read me for the big bad guy. So I wound up getting that part, and that movie did well. So that was, gave me enough juice that I could actually move to Los Angeles and make my living that way.
Cult classic. I mean, that's, it's amazing. You go back and you kind of watch. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but my thought, I always tell people, if I could be reborn at a different time, I would have been born in like 1960, because it would have been to be in my 20s in the 80s, or I'm sorry, to be in my 20s in the 80s, my 30s in the 90s, and to be, pushing 70 now would be the most ideal, right? Because I feel like I feel like that age group lived through the best times of everything. And I think about, like, what is the greatest time in American filmmaking history? I feel like it's got to be like 1985 to 2000, or maybe even 1980 to 2000.
I'd be a little more partial to the 70s. And maybe that's just because I was 18 years old in the 70s and all those Jack Nicholson movies and the Last Detail and all that stuff. I'd go back to about 75 is where I would start saying
that's your golden era.
Yeah, because that's kind of where I fell in love with, and that's why I wanted to be an actor. Is because I was such a movie buff back then, and those movies, they were interesting, they were edgy, they were profane, and they were provocative, and now everything is just so. It's not edgy anymore. It's just gross and stupid and obvious. Everything is just so. The politics is just so obvious and everything now. And back then it was a little confusing, and I think that made it more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, here's a great example. I mean, one of the best movies of all time, Taxi Driver. You're dealing with a preteen prostitute in that movie. Do you think anybody today would have the fucking balls to make that movie today?
No, absolutely not. There's so many things like that, where it's just Blazing Saddles, obviously, that's
such a great movie.
Choice. Yeah, it's a great movie, and by today's standards, they would be. There's the N-word in there. There's a bunch of homophobic jokes in there, and it's like they just would. I'm surprised when they play it on TCM and they don't censor it. It's it's shocking.
Yeah, but it's such a classic. And what's interesting too is I look at those movies. I don't know. There was a weird thing for me. I guess maybe I would agree with you that I think the most sort of punk rock era of filmmaking was definitely in the 70s, where it was like more like that was the first time in cinema where I think filmmakers are just like, fuck the rules. We're just going to make what we want to make. Right. And if they don't let us show it, we'll show it where we can show it. And, that was like where they really started to kind of push against censorship and stuff like that. And I'm kind of hoping that that's where filmmaking is maybe headed again, with all of the kind of pearl clutching stuff that's being made and all of the pandering content that's being made right now. But there was just something sort of magical about that turn in the late 80s, early 90s that was like sort of Spielberg-esque, where I felt like movies, were just sort of became more adventurous and magical, and in a way that I don't know that they ever could be again. Like when you look at those movies that I grew up with, like E.T. and The Goonies and Jurassic Park and stuff like that, like I don't know that you can ever now recreate the feelings that those movies had, because it's almost like everything now has been done. Like there really is nothing that we can't do cinematically, and so the holy shit, those are fucking dinosaurs moments don't exist in films anymore. Like I remember going to see that in the theater and being like, oh my god, those are real dinosaurs. How did they do that? Right. And it's just like it is a kind of a thing where I almost think, and you kind of made this point earlier, like I almost think the only way to make it new again is to go backwards and to make stuff that's really raw and really gritty and really character driven, and kind of get away from, big budget and tons of special effects and everything else. That's one thing that I really liked about the Tarantino interview with Joe Rogan, because he kind of talked about like his hatred of, CGI and, just what he wanted to do, or how he wants to continue to make films in a very sort of organic way. And I just think that's cool. Using practical effects and stuff like that. I just think that's the kind of movie making that I loved as a young guy. And, I still like seeing stuff like that come out now.
And I think it's going to have to go that way because, they've ruined the theater experience now. You can't really go to a movie theater, without being vaccinated or showing your card or whatever. And with all this COVID nonsense, they've kind of taken a whole generation of kids that are coming up that are going to grow up not having going to the movies being a big part of their lives. Yeah. They're just so conditioned to, we can't do that anymore, the COVID, and so that's not going to be important to them. And, the sort of big spectacle movies are the reason that you go to the cinema anymore. And since you can't really go anymore, I think, maybe those movies are going to die out. And I hope they do, because I get really bored with all the Marvel crap. I'm just not a big superhero movie fan.
Well, it's kind of like like all franchises. It's like, how many of these are you going to watch before you start to just go, oh yeah, and it's getting to the point now where it's like, if you read the comics growing up, you just know what's going to happen because it's all been written out. So you kind of know where things are going. There's really not a lot of left turns or things they can do that are super different or unique.
Spider-Man's not going to die.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. That's what's kind of crazy about it. Right. So, it's and the other thing I wanted to say about movies, about particularly going to the theaters, how do you think these massive lawsuits that are happening right now are going to affect that? Because I don't know if you saw this, but Scarlett Johansson and then a couple other A-listers are
Gerard Butler is suing for.
Yeah, they're suing. Yeah. Well, they're a little different because Gerard Butler's thing is that they just didn't fucking pay him his points money on those films. But with the girls, and supposedly it's not just Scarlett Johansson. Supposedly Emma Stone and Emily Blunt are also going to jump in on this case against Disney because of the streaming.
They got paid less than the guys? Is that
No, it has nothing to do with that. They had points deals based on a purely theatrical release. And then what happened is Disney Plus launched same-day streaming when the movies premiered, and I don't think they cut the stars in on that, which I assume they didn't, because knowing Hollywood, they're like, no, we didn't negotiate any streaming points. Just because we decided to put it out the same day as the theater doesn't mean you get a piece of it, and I'm assuming that's why they're suing.
Oh, well, they probably have a case then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm assuming that they probably went back to, the actresses and said, hey, what if we give you this small nugget of the streaming in place of the theatrical release that we just fucking tanked because we're streaming it the same day it premieres. And what's amazing to me is, that those movies did really poorly because of COVID and people still not quite wanting to go back to the theater yet. Yeah. But what's amazing is that 50% of what they did do came from at-home streaming. And so now you just look at so is the, to the point you made earlier, it's so what is the model for movie theaters going forward? I actually think movie theaters would be better off buying old prints and running old movies versus running new movies. And what's interesting is, Tarantino's done that for a long time in LA with his movies. But I think you could see people going I don't just want to capture that experience. I want to relive a specific experience for a specific movie. And so some theaters in LA have done this where they'll have E.T. for 3 nights or something, or they'll go back and they'll pull an old movie, and they make tons of money doing that because that is something that people will go out and want to experience in a group and try to recapture that sense of nostalgia. So I wouldn't be surprised if filmmaking almost flips to where older movies are what's shown in theaters now and everything new just comes out at home.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of was saying for a couple of years now that I think going to the cinema is going to be like going to the opera is 10 years ago, in a few years, it's just going to be this novelty thing. You go, we're going to go in and we're going to take in a Buster Keaton film, or something. Yeah. It's some sort of, thing like that, because everybody's so used to now watching everything on Netflix on their home theater system where they don't have to listen to people eat popcorn and answer their cell phones. And so it's going to be hard to get people used to that idea of going back to the movie theaters anymore ever again.
Well, especially when you consider the cost associated with it too. I mean, you're talking about if you I look at families that go to movies still, and I'm like, how the fuck do you afford if let's say you're going to see what was it, Soul, I think, came out in the theaters the same day it premiered on Disney Plus, and I remember seeing a family go into that movie, and I was like, okay, tickets are, let's call it $15 a piece on average because it's 20 for adults and it's 10 for kids. It's a family of 6, 4 kids and 2 parents. all with drinks and popcorns and snacks. I was like, yo, this is a fucking $200 trip to the movies.
Right.
Like, this is insane.
And you can stay at home and watch it for $9.95 or whatever.
Yeah, it's just it's wild, you know. But and I am one of those people. I still like being in the theater. I still like that feeling with certain movies. You have to watch it. Like Quiet Place. I still tell people it was like absolutely the best live theater experience I've had, maybe ever. But definitely recently. And then the sequel, not as much, but the original Quiet Place was like seeing that in the theater. It was the most thrilling a movie has ever been in the theater, you know, since I was a little kid. So it's
I think the last movie I saw in the theater was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think that's the last.
I saw that in the theater too. Yeah.
And that was great in the theater. You know, it's so big. The scope of it's beautiful. I mean, you know, and that's, you're never going to completely recreate that at home, but it's you know, the cost versus the the result has just gotten so ridiculous. I was dead set on seeing that movie because back when I was still doing Uber and stuff, I remember I drove through Hollywood the night that they did that premiere shot, which was like, you know, all the signs on Hollywood Boulevard. They had the what was it? The Pantages retrofitted to look like it was, you know, the 60s, and everything on that street. It was from Vine, past Argyle, like across from the W. So it would have been from like Vine to maybe McCadden. Was all retrofitted to look like the 70s. They had the streets shut down. They had like all these old cars in front. And I was like, holy shit, this is the first time in my life I've actually seen what movie sets used to be. Like now they just put everything in digitally. And it was amazing. Like I literally had a person, I was like on a fair and I was like, yo, do you want to pull over and like get out and look at this? And they were like, yeah. And it was just wild because, you know, living in Los Angeles through like the 70s, 80s and 90s, you probably saw stuff like that all the time. And then not anymore. You just don't see that anymore. No. They did a similar thing in Toluca Lake, I think, but they cut that scene from the movie. But they kind of restored a lot of what used to be on Riverside Drive there in Toluca Lake, like the old Money Tree and all those bars there. But I saw a picture of it, but I think Tarantino ultimately cut the scene out of the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that. And it's just amazing to know that was filmed, you know, recently. And, you know, they do such a good job of like the attention to detail to making sure that every little piece looks like it's the 60s is wild. Yeah. It's just wild. But, you know, so, you know, as the business kind of changes and evolves, I think it's rational for people, you know, like you and myself to be like, is this still the place to be? Is this still, you know, do you still have to be here for any real reason entertainment wise? And I think the answer is no.
No, you do not have to be here anymore. And so then, you know, my wife and I the only reason that we're really still here is that we have grown children who grew up here and they don't want to leave. So it's like, I keep thinking maybe when they grow up enough and they start paying their own taxes, then they're going to wise up and they're going to follow us, you know, when we leave. But that's really the only thing keeping us here. It's all emotional. And there's no sensible reason to stay in Los Angeles anymore.
Yeah. Well, so then the question begs, where's the next place? Where do you go? I mean, I'll tell you this, when we were filming my show for the Food Network, we did 24 episodes. And I'd want to say we did those in about 21 cities because a couple episodes we doubled up. Like our 4 holiday episodes were all shot between Atlanta and New York. Yeah. And then we did an Atlanta episode. So whatever that is, like 19, 20 different cities. But of all the ones I visited, the place that I feel like I would want to live is Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, that's a great town.
It's so, I mean, we filmed at this Mexican restaurant on Sullivan's Island. And I remember just walking out the door to that place, and like the highway's on one side, the beach is on the other, and you literally could hear a bird shit a mile away. It was so quiet.
Yeah.
And
the food there is amazing.
If you like seafood, which I do, if you like coastal cuisine, it's incredible. And the other thing that's really cool about Charleston is it feels like a weird, sort of almost like a post-apocalyptic city, because you could be standing on Queen Street, and on one side of the street there's an Apple store, and on the other side of the street there is a 275-year-old plantation house that is completely untouched because it has historical status. And it's like, it's kind of cool. Of course, people are going to clip this and be like, he loves plantation homes. This racist. Yeah, I like to be able to step out of dinner and be like, slaves used to stand there. But it is this kind of cool thing. There's like this everywhere else in the country, there is no history like that. No. And it's just very cool to be in a place where, even with all the modernization, there are these pockets of the community that are untouchable, that have historical status, and that, it's like living in a museum.
Yeah. Well, that's because during the Civil War, they didn't burn Charleston. They came to Charleston to knock it all down, and they made a deal with them and said, if you'll leave us alone, and so they didn't burn it down. So a lot of the stuff that they completely destroyed in Atlanta and the rest of the South and Charleston, they managed to save most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's really not a ton going on over there entertainment-wise. I mean, there's a couple production companies have moved there. Like Danny McBride moved his whole company to Charleston. But they do maybe a movie and a TV show a year, so there's not a lot of output there. Right. But there's a lot of stuff. You're not far from Atlanta, you're not far from Nashville. You're a 90-minute flight from New York. I'm an hour flight from home to Philadelphia. So I don't know. I mean, I also kind of like the idea of not being where everyone else is. Everyone's like flooding Nashville and Austin and Atlanta, and these places are just going to be oversaturated. Like, to me, I've just spent the last 10 years, living somewhere because of what I wanted to do. And it would be nice to live somewhere because that's where you want to live. You know what I mean? And then figure the rest out.
Yeah.
Because it's, could I eat fucking crab legs and fish I could eat that shit every day. I would love it. I would love it.
So many of my friends, have moved to Nashville. Like almost everybody I know is in Tennessee now, because the other thing about Tennessee is that it's no state income tax. So
yeah, that's a big one.
The minute you leave California and you wind up in Tennessee, that saves you 13% of your income. I mean, and so I think that I will probably wind up there. But just because too, that's very close to my family. My family's in North Carolina. My wife's family's in Kentucky. Nashville is kind of like equidistant between those two places. So it's a good compromise for us. And then, there is a little bit of business to be done. If I want to keep working, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, Nashville is it's a cool city. You know what I mean? Like but I will say this, it is I had a friend who took me through like the cool part of Nashville and was like, this is going to feel like Hollywood East, and she was right. She was totally right. Like there are as many like delusional, never made it, not gonna make it musicians there as there are delusional, never made it, not gonna make it actors here.
Yeah. The focus is different, but it's the same principle.
It's the same kind of people, right? And you could sit in a bar. You can sit in a bar and you hear people talk about that next opportunity that's going to be the one that's going to kind of like push them over the line, right?
Yeah.
So
and in that sense, but that kind of gives it a little bit of energy. It's like having lived in New York City and trying to be get going in the theater up there, and having lived in LA and trying to get the movie career going. It kind of has that same kind of energy. At least there's some ambition there,
Yeah. I mean, and there's some great venues. Like if you were going to try to put some monthly shows together or something, you've got a lot of very cool venues, historic venues.
Yeah.
I just, it is weird. It's just, it's not a bad city, but I will just say, to me, if it's like, I want to live somewhere that is kind of like my speed, I would be more Charleston or, somewhere in the Carolinas, maybe even Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, I like Myrtle Beach.
I like when, that was like when I growing up in Philadelphia, there were people who were wealthy who were like, when we vacation, we go to Florida. And we're the kind of people like Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Now most of my family lives in Delaware and Maryland. We're the kind of people where we're like, our vacation is in like the Carolinas. You know what I mean? Like, which is like, you could still get the beach, but for about half the money of Florida. But I just grew up going down there and just like loving that. The beaches out there smell different than the beaches everywhere else in the country.
Oh yeah, North Carolina, South Carolina beaches are the best. My family, we went to Myrtle Beach. That was where we went. That was our summer vacation. So.
Yeah, it's what part of North Carolina are you from originally?
I grew up in the mountains near Asheville. It's a little bitty town called Cullowhee. It's a little town in North Carolina.
Asheville's become like a whole hipster place now, right?
Yeah, it's the San Francisco of North Carolina. Yeah, there's a lot of woke stuff there. There's a lot of reparations there. There's a lot of craziness. But like, when I go home to visit my parents and I see the people in Silva, they're all like, "Yep, they need to build a fence around Asheville. Need not let those people out of there anymore."
Yeah, it's very much not like the rest of North Carolina. That's for sure.
Right, but it's becoming. All cities are becoming the same. Yeah. All cities everybody's going to be moving to the country to get away from the crazy people in the cities.
Yeah.
And by crazy people, I mean Democrats.
Well, and the homelessness too, which is like the biggest issue, right? I mean, I've had people, it's funny, like I've had people that made the move to Austin and they were like, yo, there's as many homeless people here as there were in LA. It's like, yeah, dude, like they go where the money is. And obviously if everybody rich from LA or well off from LA is moving to Austin, the homeless will follow suit.
Yeah, and it's like they go where they're going to be left alone. It's like they don't roust them out and make them go to shelters in Los Angeles, so they go there.
Yeah.
And same thing in San Francisco. It's like if you don't stop that behavior, you get more of it.
Yeah. Well, you see San Francisco as like fucking Mad Max now. I mean, there's literally just people, there was that legislation that passed sometime during the pandemic or whatever, where they were like, we're not going to prosecute theft, under a certain amount. And this is like
$900.
Yeah. And there's just now just like black people are just taking garbage bags into fucking, into like Walgreens and filling them up and just walking out. And it's like all those clips, as much as you would be like, no, it's everybody. Like, unfortunately, all those clips are like black homeless people in San Francisco who are just like, you're not going to come after me because then I'll have a discrimination lawsuit against you. So the brazenness of it is just funny to me. Whereas just people are just like, yeah, I'm stealing. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Well, there was a guy who put something up, a video that he made in San Francisco of just two people just having sex between two parked cars right in the middle of like Market District in San Francisco. It's like, this is not like a really bad area, but they just made some drug deal. And I guess that the drug deal involved sex. And they just did it right on the street between two parked cars. The guy called the cops. The cop says, well, by the time we get there, they'll be done. And so nothing happened.
Yeah. Unless that guy's going for the record. They're not going to be there by the time. What are we going to do?
I'll call you back if they change positions. I'll call you back. But yeah, it looks like they're almost done.
God, I could not. I did a show with a friend of mine, Nick Cobb. We did a show in San Francisco in like 2015. This was before I had my TV show. And we were like, listen, we should be able to do a show for like 25, 30 people, no problem, in San Francisco. Yeah. And I shit you not, like we had to bark people into that place the day of, and we didn't realize like we picked the venue we picked based on the recommendation of local comics there, and they were like, yeah man, this is like a cool comedy venue. They do shows there like once a month and stuff. It's very cool. And we were like, okay, cool. And I looked at it on a map and I was like, oh, it's like right around the corner from Market Street. It should be fine. Well, I did not realize what the Tenderloin had become since I had last been in San Francisco in like 2009. Yeah. And so we went and did this show, and I was like, man, our pre-sales are kind of low. We had only pre-sold like 2/3 of the room, and I was like, we should have sold this fucking tiny room out way in advance, because we were hoping we would do a second show. And then we got to I drove up there, and we got to the venue, and I was like, oh, this is why nobody's coming here. And every fan that came to the show for us was like, what the fuck are you doing having this show here? I almost got murdered 3 times walking into this place.
Oh my God.
And you literally just had to like walk through seas of aggressive homeless people to get to it was like a bar that had like a downstairs venue for performance. And it was a mistake. And now I'm just like, I don't want to do San Francisco ever.
No. And well, I've been doing a little bit of comedy. I was telling you before, my friend Rodney Carrington asked me to come out and give it a try about 6 months ago. I did my first show with him in November. And, his audience kind of knows me because I was on his sitcom. Mm-hmm. So I have a little bit of a head start. But going out and doing shows with Rodney in the middle of the country where, and Rodney's audience tends to skew a little bit more conservative, even though Rodney works pretty blue, it's kind of those conservatives that don't mind a little cussing and a few dick jokes here and there. Mm-hmm. And just good old boys. Yeah, yeah. And just going out with him and seeing how audiences that are not on the coast and not in the big cities respond, and just it's just normal life there. It's kind of like going around with Rodney. It's like I can forget the fact that, they've ruined Los Angeles and that comedy doesn't exist here anymore. Because out in the middle of the country, when you get out there, people still want to laugh and want to have a good time. And, they're not afraid to laugh at stuff that people in LA and the woke crowds and the big cities would just be appalled at, that. Yeah,
I don't even think the crowds here are that uptight. I mean, like if you still pop into the clubs, like you could still pop into the Ha Ha Cafe in North Hollywood. I was there a couple weeks ago. Yeah. You could pop into the comedy. Like the audiences that actually go to live stand up are not uptight, and they're not weird, and they're not like.
They're not there to be offended.
Yeah, most of that shit is not happening in the comedy clubs. Like there are certain clubs in LA where that kind of thing does happen because they paper the room and they have a lot of they have like a lot of industry that pops into those shows. Like, the Laugh Factory is kind of like notoriously not traditional comedy fans. And then the Comedy Store, pre-pandemic was like the most diehard comedy fans. And then the improv was sort of like somewhere in between. But a lot of the audience at the improv is like papered and industry related, people as well. So it's like the only people that are offended by the content in this business are the people that work in this business. And it's like this weird psychology of elimination of like, well, if I deem this inappropriate, then I don't have to compete with it. And
yeah, so it's mostly coming from other comedians that are being offended, not people in the audience.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just this weird posturing that doesn't really exist in live stand-up at all. I mean, even at the show, I started off the podcast talking to you about the conservative one where they were like pearl clutchy, like they just got like quiet, like they would laugh and then they would stop right away. It was almost like it's funny, but I don't want other people to see that I think it's funny. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's like this weird. It's like this weird. It was almost like we're in a porno theater and people are like, "Well, I want to jerk off, but I'm not going to jerk off unless everybody else is jerking off." And then I'm not going to be the first guy to take his dick out, but I do want to take my dick out. That's pretty much what it. That's pretty much. And meanwhile, the two gay guys are over there. Their dicks were already out. They were ready to go. I said "gay doctor" and they were like, "This part of the show's for us." And but yeah, it's just it is this kind of there is this weird thing, like Rodney's audience is a great example. There are a lot of people that like Rodney that would never like what I do. And then there are a lot of people who, comedy that's kind of like at the other end of the spectrum. That's like super weird or maybe like alt comedy. And they don't like what I do either because I make fun of race. I make fun of sexual orientation. I make fun of gender. So yeah, there's kind of like this weird, there is this like weird genre sort of splicing in comedy where people are very specific now about what they like. And you just have to work harder to find people that sort of specifically like what you do.
I think too that's a feature of how I was talking to somebody the other day about how we don't really have a unified culture anymore. Like we used to have where everybody's watching the same shows. There are only a few networks, and like those days of like everybody watching the final episode of Seinfeld or something.
Yeah.
That's never coming back. It's all splintered and everybody's finding their niche audience. And so, and we've entered a world where you don't have to appeal to everybody. You just have to appeal to enough people that make your venture successful. And that's really what it all boils down to now.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of sad to think that we won't have those moments again.
Right.
Because I remember how much fun that was watching the final episode of Seinfeld and going to school and talking about it the next day. And, and those things being kind of over. But, I don't know.
We've been intentionally divided anyway. They pitted us against each other. And so, it's not cool for, somebody who's in Dave Chappelle's audience, per se, to laugh at Rodney's jokes or whatever. And it's like, we just become compartmentalized, and that's all been part of the left strategy. As far as this is the paranoid Nick Searcy talking, but that's what I think's going on. I think that's been a strategy, is to make us not a unified culture. They want to splinter us off and pit us against each other.
Well, and there's been this, I don't know where this quote came from initially or who said this idea first, but like race and class and injustice, those are kind of like the bones that the wealthy and the powerful throw to the dogs to fight over while they just get wealthier and more powerful.
Right.
And it's amazing how much we sort of take the bait, where 80% of the people that are not in the 1% are arguing over what's more racist, what's more sexist, what's more homophobic. The wild thing about that to me is it's like none of it is really based in truth. It's all just sort of like it's like they go on a quest to find it and then they just make it up wherever they want to find it. And then that stuff, historically you would just sort of ignore it, but that stuff now has like real world ramifications where everyone is reacting to it, or at least pretending to. And you see it with like the Oscars, you see it with hiring, and you see it right now with the vaccine more than anything else. It's like so many people, and I have friends that know, like I'm somewhat legally savvy. I've been through a couple lawsuits in the last 10 years. One of them, lost the other one. Yeah. But also had to be pretty legally savvy in my job from an HR perspective as a retail director of operations for many years. So, I know a good amount of like hiring law, firing law, HR law, anti-discrimination stuff. And so many people have messaged me like, is it legal for places to tell you that they're just not going to hire you or they're going to fire you because you're not vaccinated? And I go, well, absolutely not. And in many ways, it's not even legal for them to ask because of the nature of the other information that they're getting about you or asking about you in that asking. But the problem is it's kind of like a speed limit situation. Like if everybody's going 80, you're not going to start writing tickets.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so what's happening right now is that so many companies and in industries are just like, fuck it. We'll just make it mandatory and we'll take our chances at getting sued and hope that, no judges take these cases and no lawyers take these cases. And then we can just break the law and get away with it. And that's kind of what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, well, they've successfully corrupted enough of the judicial system that the fact that they aren't legally able to do that doesn't stop them, because, and you also have a situation where there's about, especially here in Los Angeles, California, that there's about 60% of the population that supports it, that they're fine with it, like they think it should happen because you should have to be vaccinated by force because we're all going to die if you don't. They bought the whole thing.
It's unbelievable. I mean, like for you to believe that narrative, you have to really know nothing about the medical research or the technology or anything that's involved in any of this. Like you have to kind of know nothing about virology or epidemiology at all to believe that all of the things they're telling you are true. Like the vaccine can save your life, but also it doesn't keep you from contracting it, and it doesn't keep you from getting it, and it doesn't protect other people from getting it from you. And then like a common sense person would just go, what? What the fuck are you talking about?
It? Right. Then why do we need it?
It's
protect anybody.
It's like, honestly, and people have asked me this on other podcasts, people go like, why are you so opposed? And I go, I'll tell you plain and simple. I am so opposed because they so want me to do it. And never in the history of our government have they tried to shove something like this down our throats so fucking hard. And that doesn't make me feel good. That makes me feel like there's more to the story that they're not giving us. Because of the idea that the government would ever entertain walking into your property and forcing you to take a fucking vaccination. The idea that they're even considering that the fucking president would even say that to the media as a possibility is like, what are you not telling us? It's like, that is insane. The idea that you would literally risk going to civil war with the nation, for this fucking shot is like, it's that to me is like, that is enough cause for concern to go, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and the fact that so many of the people around us, our fellow citizens, are fine with it. That they don't see this as outrageous. I'm opposed to it just because it doesn't make any fucking sense. None of it makes any sense. The things that they're advocating, like, all school children have to be vaccinated, children under the age of 12, that's where it gets really sinister to me. I can see an argument for people over 65, people in their 70s. I can see an argument for that being, that's probably a good idea. But when you start just telling, kids under 12 have to be vaccinated and wear a mask at school, that is total bullshit. That doesn't make one bit of sense. And that's when I start thinking, okay, this is sinister. There is something else going on here that they're not telling us, or they would not be pushing this bullshit this hard.
I mean, they don't even push nutrition this hard. That's what's amazing to me is like you fight back so hard against food labeling, like to protect large, farming interests or pesticide companies or whatever. Organizations like Monsanto. There are so many things you look the other way on when it comes to the health of the American people. And now you're like, we will fucking hold you down and make sure you don't die. It's like, what? No. What if I want to? What if I'm fine with it?
And at what point in human life did you ever think that the government gives a shit whether you live or die?
No, never. I still don't believe. So that's the thing is like, well, you don't care if I'm around. So
I mean, what is the other reason? Die in wars, the government does not give a shit whether you get a cold or not. Yeah. And people have to stop thinking that that's really an honest motive on their part.
Yeah, and there are people on the sort of the liberal end of conspiracy where they're like, well, they need all of us alive to pay the taxes and hand them our money. It's like, yeah, that is a so this is the Hail Mary after they've let us fucking waterboard ourselves with McDonald's for 50 years and and smoke for 100 years and drink for 200 years. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you've got a disease that affects people that are out of shape more, so you close all the gyms. you make sure everybody can drink and eat and get their marijuana, but you don't let them take care of themselves or don't even encourage it. The whole thing is just to me, it makes so little sense and has from the beginning that I just can't believe how many people are actually swallowing it.
It's pretty wild. I mean, where do you think it goes? I mean, where do you think things progress like from now until the next election? Because I think as much as we talked about California, about this gubernatorial election being the deciding factor of, you know, maybe both of our futures of staying in Los Angeles or not. What do you think the next presidential election means in terms of the country? Because everyone said this last one was the most important one in our history, but I think without question, this next one is going to determine whether we right the ship or this whole fucking thing hits the iceberg.
Well, the problem I have is that I think we righted the ship with the last election, but, you know, it didn't matter because they stole it. Mm-hmm. And the reason they were able to steal it is because they shut everything down so that they could make it all mail-in voting. And mail-in voting is just made to be
manipulated.
Corrupt. Yeah, it's made to be corrupt. So that's what I think all this lockdown that's coming now in California is. I think it's all about Gavin Newsom. I think they're trying to negate that election so that they can do the same thing they did last time and make it all mail-in voting. It's not safe. We can't go to the polls. You know, we're going to do this all mail-in. And I think that's now that they have successfully shut us down so many times, they're never going to give up that power. Yeah. So it's going to keep happening. Every time there's an election, there's going to be a new virus, and they're going to shut us down again. And until people wake up and go, we're not doing this bullshit anymore, they're going to keep getting away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's hard not to see the correlation between us ramping up to the next lockdown and the recall election being 35, 40 days away.
Yeah.
So
no, it's all about politics. It always has been. It's always been about politics. This is a virus that has a 99.7% survival rate, especially in people under 80. You know, so what are we even talking about? It's all
it's. I remember them being like, if you're fat, you're gonna die if you get this. And then I got it, and I was like, it's like the flu.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had it too. And you know, everybody, of course, on Twitter, go ahead, don't get vaccinated, old man. You're gonna die. You know, hope you join your pal Rush Limbaugh soon, or what? You know, all that shit. It's like, sorry, we're all going to die someday, pal. You know, it's going to happen to everybody.
Yeah, you know, and this is another thing that I've worked on in my act that I'm talking about, which is kind of like my closing chunk now, is just like, I don't have the same obsession that a lot of people seem to have about staying alive forever. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I am still a pretty young guy. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in 2 weeks. And, you know, like, there's not a lot of shit left on my bucket list of like, man, I got to do that. You know what I mean? Like there really is that, like, there's some things I do want to do. But at the end of the day, it's like, and this is what's always kind of perplexing to me. Like, I don't think of myself as a very religious guy, but then I compare notes with people when I say things like this. And then I go, maybe I'm more religious than I realize. But because my thing is like, if you have any faith that this existence is not the end for us, you wouldn't be so fucking fearful of death. You know what I mean? And like, I don't have a definitive idea of what happens when we die, but I don't think our mortal, you know, I don't think our physical death is our end of existence entirely. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't, it's like, I think that after this thing is the next thing. And I also think that life is proof that wouldn't that be just the most fitting shit, is that when it's finally fucking over, it's just not. You know what I mean? Like, if God is anything like people, or the creator of us is anything like people, he's like, these motherfuckers think it's over. What if it's not?
It's never going to be over.
It's never over. It's fucking, now you're a snail and you're getting raped every day by frogs. You know, like that would make sense. Like some asshole, I could see some asshole doing that. So, you know, like, I don't know. But there's this weird, so I'm at this sort of weird at peace. Listen, so many people better than me have not gotten to live a full life. Right. And the other argument is like, I don't obsess over my health. in any other way, shape, or form about my leg. I enjoy food. I eat whatever I want. I don't work out as much as I should. I don't look after myself as much as I should. The entitlement I would have to think, how dare I not live forever when I've treated my fucking body like a cheap whore for the last 37 years. You know, like,
right.
You know, I deserve, and like I think you liked this tweet I said when I was like, people are like, if you don't get the vaccine, you'll die. I was like, yo, after a bad breakup one time, I fucking raw dogged a stranger on her period and had to get her home before her house arrest bracelet went out. I'm playing with house money. Like, I should have gotten all of the VD that ever existed from that escapade and other escapades. So, like, I think of myself as very lucky to have the time that I've had so far. And there's this weird thing of, like, I feel like the people that are the most obsessed with staying alive are often the people that are making the least of the time that they've already had or the time that they do have. And
I agree.
And so to me, it's just a very, like, it's interesting, like, that sense of panic is from a lot of people who are like, oh, I kept putting off everything I ever wanted to do in life, and now I'm going to run out of time if they don't get this fucking vaccine, or if I catch this disease. And it's like, or maybe you should just be, doing the things you want to do in your life that make you happy now and stop putting them off. And so I think so much of the fucking, the fever pitch around vaccination, particularly from the side of the people that are vaccinated, is like, I want you to do drugs with me. Like, I don't want to be the only person who's doing the drugs in the fucking party, because if the batch is bad, I don't want to be the only idiot.
Yeah. No, I've said from the beginning, I mean, I identify as a Christian, and I've said from the beginning in talking to even my Jewish friends and my Buddhist friends that this really breaks down along spiritual lines. If you don't have any sort of belief in an afterlife or any sort of spiritual idea about your existence whatsoever, then you are much more susceptible to this idea that you have to do whatever you can to keep yourself alive for as long as you possibly can, because after this is over, there's nothing else. And so that's what I think is happening. That's part of why this gets into, like, long-term, what the left has done to this country over decades. But that's kind of why they have just systematically removed any sort of religious or moral instruction from every aspect of education, is because if you have people that do not have any sort of spiritual underpinning, and I almost don't care what it is, then they are susceptible to being ruled by a totalitarian government that can tell them every move to make, because this life is all that matters. And in order to preserve this life, you have to do what we tell you. And that, to me, that's how it all breaks down. It's a spiritual battle in that sense.
Yeah, I don't know who said this, because I consume so much fucking podcasting and stuff and shows and clips, but it might have been Russell Brand. I don't know. But somebody said, because we now live in a culture that has a complete absence of God, the government is trying to assume the role of God.
That's exactly right.
In our lives. And I thought that was such a sort of prophetic statement from whoever it said it, that I forgot to give credit.
Well, that's why communists always, whenever they take over a country, the first thing they do is get rid of the churches. They make it illegal. They outlaw the priests, because if you have a higher power that's not government, your allegiance is not going to be enough for the totalitarians. So.
Yeah, and it's so weird how they sort of brand conservative patriotism as that sort of scary patriotic fascism, but in reality, behavior-wise, they're the side that's sort of enacting all of the policies and stuff that are more totalitarian and more authoritarian.
No, they're the fascists. That's why they keep screaming about Antifa and anti-fascist. They're the fascists. They're the one that want to impose everything on everybody else, and they know that.
I mean, it's anybody who's calling someone an ist is probably more that ist than the person that they're like, you're sexist, they're probably more sexist. If they think you're racist or homophobic, they probably are more that than you are. And you know, it's the old adage of every time you point a finger, there's three pointing back at you. I mean, that's so much. But here's the thing: is how do you? I guess we'll wrap this up here because we're getting close on time. But how do you keep people from getting disappointed at that? So like the tricky thing is like, okay, let's say there are only so many types of people in the world. They fall on one side of this sort of point of view or one side of way of thinking or the other. Where do you look to find the parts of our civilization or the parts of humanity that give you cause to keep going? Like, what are the things that you look to that go like, yeah, it's worth hanging around to be a part of this?
Well, it's getting tougher and tougher. I mean,
I agree. I agree.
As you get, when you get to be my age, I'm like 62. It's like, everything gets old after a while. It's like there's not so much that interests me. And I don't have the same interest even in acting and in things like that I used to have. It's just not as engrossing to me anymore. It's not as fascinating to me. And I think more and more, just for me personally, I think more and more I tend to, my focus is now much more about my relationship with my wife and my family, and also kind of a spiritual sort of thing. I've gotten a bit more, a bit more of a good boy in my last few years, like my mom would say, and I'm sort of spending more of my time, finding churches that I like that are not, that aren't woke churches. There's so many of them now.
Yeah. Is that a big thing? Woke churches?
Oh, you bet. No, they have absolutely infiltrated a lot of the churches. And like a friend of mine took me to one, and that he said he kind of liked. And the first thing they did was read this whole letter about apologizing for systemic racism, and I'm like, that's not very Christian. That's I don't think Jesus would like that. And it's kind of there's an leftists have infiltrated every institution, and the churches are no, they're not exempt. So, but I've found a couple, a couple of churches here in California. There's a lot more in other parts of the country, but I guess what I'm trying to say is as I've gotten older, I've started to seek God a little bit more than I did when I was a younger man, and I find more satisfaction in that than I used to.
That's good. I mean, I think I think it's kind of similar for me. It's more about just getting outside of yourself in any way that you sort of can, right? Like, right. I think, one of the things that I learned through this sort of pandemic thing is like, and not just the pandemic, but like I had a rough couple of years going into the pandemic. So like right around when the pandemic started was when I was like, man, I'm about to turn shit around. Like I'm about to crawl out of the debt that I'm in and start to get billed back and do these other things. And then everything came to a fucking crashing halt. And I had this sort of weird sense of like, letting go of like even caring about some of those things that were stressing me out and bothering me and that I was obsessing over that were negative in my life, because it's like, at the end of the day, what do those things really matter? Like, are they really important? And, for me, I kind of like came out of those years and through this pandemic of being like, as long as I have people in my life that bring me joy, like friends whose time I enjoy spending with them. Right. I have a loving partner who's amazing, who supports me in everything that I do. I have family members that, as fucked up as they might be, they're good people and they care, and and so I think it's kind of like the thing in Fight Club when they're like, it's only once you lose everything that you're free to do anything. And I think when you realize, like, when you kind of let go of all of those ideas of like, well, this is what I want, or this is what I need to be happy, or this is what these are the finish lines I have to cross to feel accomplished in life. And, and then when you look around, you go, well, what are the most miserable people I know lacking? And it's not money, and it's not credits, and it's not, projects that were very successful. Like, they're people that don't have love. They're people that don't have family. They're people that don't have friendship. And so to me, those are the things I value. Like, those are the and I felt like a real shithead looking back and be like, man, I was obsessed over all this stuff and stressing out. And meanwhile, I have all these great things in my life. Like, really, I don't have a ton of friends, but I have very good friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people that whose company I genuinely enjoy. And I'm making more of those as time goes on. And, but yeah, it's, you know, I think you kind of, for me, it's like really taking stock of what matters. And, you know, the just absolutely having no reason to sort of keep up with the Joneses in a materialistic way. You know what I mean? Like of even just like in terms of accomplishment. Because, you know, if you spend your entire life comparing your accomplishments to other people's, or your money to other people's, or any of those things to other people's, you're never going to be happy. It's the saying, comparison is the thief of joy, is the truest thing anyone has ever said. And so when you let go of that and you just go like, man, I'm just going to do the things I want to do every day with the people I want to be around, it's a pretty freeing sense, you know?
It absolutely is. It's there's a certain point I reached where it's like, a lot of this ambition that I had, you know, a lot of it was vanity. A lot of it was just sort of stuff that I wanted to, you know, prove something to myself or prove something to someone else. And I sort of feel like I've reached that point in my life is whatever that was that I wanted to prove, I've proven it to whatever degree that I wanted to. And now what's important to me are just, you know, not spending my time around people that hate me because I have a different opinion than them, or
what a horrible way to be.
I know.
I mean, what a fragile way to be, by the way, of like that you can't be in the presence of someone who thinks differently than you. Like, what a pussy way to live your life.
Yeah. I mean, I play golf with a bunch of guys and one of us is a Democrat, you know, it's like, you know, what the hell?
Is it the caddy?
Yeah, he's an old friend of mine. I was like shocked to find out that he was a Democrat, but he was like, you know, a lot of my friends, I don't hang out with a lot of Republicans. I go, well, you should. We're better people.
That's absolutely true. Did you go through that sort of divorce as things became more politicized in Hollywood? Did you go through that divorce with friends of yours in the business of, you know, you becoming, you know, more, and I think you've, you know, I didn't like go back and fucking stalk your entire social media forever. But I think you've been on record as being conservative for a pretty good amount of the time you've been in Hollywood. It's not like you're not like a new conservative, but I think it matters to people more, or it has started to matter to people more in the last few years.
Definitely. Was
there a moment where that sort of were like, oh, this is going to be a thing now?
Well, you know, it always was a little bit of a thing, but you're right. I mean, I can remember feeling different. You know, I'm different from most of the people that I worked with all through the Bush years and all that. But, you know, after the Obama election and that's when it really started to be like, you know, that idea of like if you're against what Obama wants to do, you're a racist and all this stuff. But it really happened with Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, I was never really much of a Trump fan until after, you know, I voted for him because I didn't want to vote for Clinton. But, you know, after that happened and they started really going all in on the everybody who votes for Trump is a racist thing, that's where I went, okay, if you want to be this way, we'll be this way, you know. And so I did lose a few friends then, not because I ran them off, but they chose to run off, and that's fine. You know, I don't mind that because my life is a lot better for it. But yeah, Trump definitely galvanized everything. And the reason he did is because Trump was the first real threat that the left has had. Bush was not really a threat. Trump was a threat.
Yeah, Bush was not really a threat to get out of bed every day.
Right. Right.
I mean, if you ask me, like, how did that guy spend his days as president?
I don't know.
I can't imagine. I can't even remember of seeing him do anything other than the 9/11 shit. So,
right.
You know, I was like, there was 9/11 and then Obama got elected. Like, there's like 8 years between that everybody fucking just sort of forgets about. But, but yeah, the thing that was kind of like, and the thing that was weird for me is like, it was like my views never changed, but which parties were accepting of them is what kind of changed over time. And so, you know, I definitely was somebody who kind of got pushed to the right because the pendulum shifted the other way where, you know, what I considered to be free and open-minded started to become more authoritarian and totalitarian and communist and socialist in nature. And so that kind of pushed me over. But it's kind of interesting, you know, it was weird for me going through that in the business because my views never really changed. I just never was like, oh, I'm a conservative or I'm on the right. Yeah. And then eventually then people started sort of like confronting me about it, like, oh, well, are you conservative or are you this? And I go, well, it really depends on the issue. Like, give me the issue. And then it sort of outlined like, now what I think is skews very, very conservative. And, you know, based on where things have shifted from. And then, you know, there's just people left and right being like, you know, well, I can't associate with you anymore. And it's like, I don't think anybody cares. I don't think anybody was keeping tabs on your association with me in the first place, but okay.
Right. Well, it's like, you know, I'm kind of the same way. You know, my views haven't changed. They've gone crazy.
Yeah.
You know, the other side's gone insane. You know?
Yeah. I mean, there are certain things like we have to all be able to agree upon, like biology, you know, common sense. Those are individualism. I mean, those are some things that. Yeah. Those are some things that I think we all have to kind of come to the table and agree upon, and it's amazing how much of that stuff that I would think would be a given is not even agreeable in the least sense.
Well, they want to destroy all of that, you know. That I made some joke about the transgender weightlifter the other day. It's like, are you kidding me? And I think the joke I made was, you know, it's too bad that she flopped. She gave both her left and her right nut at a chance at that medal. You know, it's like,
that's funny.
You know, but it's funny. Like we can't even agree on men shouldn't like compete in women's sports. I mean, once you get to that, it's like, okay.
Yeah, the idea that who we are is such a social construct is just
it's insanity. It's insanity.
And then the fact that we're not even consistent in the way we apply that fucked up logic. It's like, you know, well, how I choose to view myself should be taken seriously in regards to gender and sexual orientation, but your race is not up to you. It's like you don't get to. So you can be transgender, but you can't be transracial. You can't choose to identify as a different race. We consider that absurd, but believing that you were meant to have different genitalia between your legs is fine. Yeah. So now it's like, you know, I don't know. There's the part of me that's like, you know, I'll go on these like long podcasts and we'll rant about this stuff and we'll talk about it. And then there's this other part of me that's like, nah, you just have to treat it as ridiculous as it is and just be ridiculous back to them. And and you know, it eventually, hopefully that will work itself out. And if not, boy, do I look forward to the apocalypse that's pending.
That's right.
You know, we didn't think they could kill Superman. They found a way to do it. They'll find a way to kill America too if we let them. So.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
All right, man. It was great having you on, Nick. I appreciate it. You got anything coming up or anything you want people to know about where they can come find you or check out your stuff? Well, obviously Locals. We're buddies on Locals.
Right. And there's a website, shedhisgrace.com. There's a documentary I made about the Bible and the Constitution, shedhisgrace.com. You can watch that today. And I'm in the middle of finishing editing a documentary about a very non-controversial subject, January 6th. So,
that should be nice.
That we're hoping to finish that before Labor Day. So, if you hear about me being picked up by the FBI, you'll know why.
Yeah, well, when we go off, we'll have to talk about that because we have mutual friends that I wanted to catch up with you on to see if we know where they're at. But But yeah, man, it's great chatting as always. We'll do it in person here sometime soon. Yeah, maybe we'll head up to there's a really cool restaurant in our neighborhood that I've checked out that's kind of newer that I don't know if you've been to yet or not. But we'll end this here, and I'll make sure that.